It was a two-story house, an older build with a mother-in-law suite in the basement. My sister, Emma, had taken the downstairs unit, and I had the upper floor to myself. She wasn't home much, always off staying at her boyfriend's apartment across town. Most nights, it was just me in that house, empty and quiet except for the usual creaks of an old structure settling. I was 30. I shouldn't have let it get to me, but sometimes, being alone in a place like that made the shadows seem darker than they should be. That night, I was on the couch watching a horror movie. The setup of my unit meant that the living room, kitchen, and dining area were all part of one big open space. The couch sat right in the middle, facing the TV, with my back to the open expanse of the dark room behind me. It was the kind of layout that made you feel exposed, vulnerable. Every so often, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, catching movement in the dark that wasn't really there. After the movie ended, I brushed my teeth, turned out all the lights, and went to bed. I woke up at 1 a.m. At first, I wasn't sure what had startled me awake. My bedroom was still cloaked in darkness, silent except for the faint hum of the fridge downstairs. Then I heard it, a voice from the lower level. It was Emma's voice. The sound was unmistakable. I wasn't dreaming, wasn't half asleep anymore. It was clear as day, her voice drifting up from the basement apartment, calling my name. I sat up in bed, still groggy, trying to process it. Emma wasn't supposed to be home, but I had heard her. Not from outside, from inside the house. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up. The hallway was pitch black until I flipped on the light. It barely helped, casting long, looming shadows in the open living space as I moved toward the basement stairs. She called again. "Ethan." I hesitated at the top of the stairs. "Emma." My voice came out unsteady. No answer. I stepped down cautiously, one slow footstep at a time. The light switch in the foyer was impossible to find in the dark, so I fumbled forward, my breath shallow. "Emma, are you okay?" Still nothing. Finally, my fingers found the switch, and I flicked it on. The kitchen light buzzed to life, dim at first before growing brighter. The room below was empty. The apartment was quiet. No Emma. No boyfriend. No sign of anyone. I swallowed hard, stepping toward her bedroom. The door was open. The bed was still made. A cold rush of unease ran through me. Then, a loud thump. It came from Emma's room. My stomach dropped. I had just looked in there. I took a step back, eyes locked on the darkened doorway. For several seconds, there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the fridge again. My skin prickled with an icy fear. I turned and bolted up the stairs, practically tripping over myself as I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I called her number. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I locked my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to believe I had imagined it. Maybe I was just groggy. Maybe it was some weird audio distortion, neighbors' voices bouncing off the walls. But the noise in the bedroom, that wasn't my imagination. Morning came too slowly. When the sunlight finally streamed through the curtains, I felt a strange relief, like whatever presence had filled the house overnight had dissipated. I checked my phone. A message from Emma. "Hey, why did you call me at 1 a.m.? I felt sick. Were you home last night?" I typed. "No, I was at Caleb's. What's up?" I didn't respond. Instead, I went back downstairs to her room. I needed to check. I needed proof that something had been in there. But there was nothing. No sign of anything fallen, nothing out of place. The only evidence of what had happened was the deep, gut-wrenching feeling that something had been in that house with me. Something that had used my sister's voice. Story 2. Being alone never really bothered me. I grew up an only child, spent long hours by myself while my mom worked late shifts as a nurse. She trusted me to hold down the fort. Even after my older brother left for college, I didn't mind the empty house. That night, I had a girl over, Maddie. We had been talking for a while, not officially together, but close enough. She stayed for a few hours, watching movies in my bedroom, sprawled out on my bed like we did most weekends. Eventually, she had to leave. Her parents didn't like her out late. I walked her to the door, kissed her goodnight, and locked up after her. I went back upstairs to my room, flipped through some TV channels, and stretched out on my bed, getting comfortable. It was a quiet, humid night. My bedroom window faced the backyard, which opened into a thick tree line at the edge of the property. We had a wooden deck back there, furnished with a few chairs and a table. I wasn't even thinking about it, until I heard something move outside. A soft, scraping sound. I sat up slightly, my ears straining. It wasn't loud, but distinct. A chair sliding against the dexwood. I got up, walked over to the window, and looked down. There was a man sitting in one of the chairs, staring up at my window. For a moment, my brain didn't register what I was seeing. The backyard was dark, only partially illuminated by the distant street lamp at the end of the driveway. But I could make out the silhouette of a man, hunched slightly forward, hands resting on his knees. He wasn't moving. My first thought was Maddie. Maybe she had come back for something? But as soon as I thought it, I knew it wasn't her. This person was bigger, broader, completely unfamiliar. I felt an icy chill creep up my spine. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering. A sick feeling churned in my stomach, but I forced myself to move, to be rational. Maybe it was one of my friends messing with me. Maybe someone had wandered onto the wrong property. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick text to my group chat. Anyone at my house right now? The responses were almost immediate. What? No. Why? Are you okay? My mouth went dry. Not them. I slowly crept back to the window, taking a deep breath before peeking out again. He was still there. But now, he was sitting differently, his shoulders shaking, his chest moving in rapid, jerky movements. At first, I thought he was sobbing, but then I realized what it really was. He was laughing. I couldn't hear it, just saw his body convulsing silently. Then, suddenly, a faint wheezing sound reached my ears, almost like a whistle. Panic shot through me. I stepped away from the window, heart pounding so loud I swore he could hear it. I turned off my TV, my lamp, anything that would signal I was still awake. I needed to be invisible. I stood frozen in the dark, barely breathing. I told myself if I stayed quiet, if I didn't move, he'd get bored and leave. But then I heard it, the back door handle turning. I almost screamed. My legs moved before I could think, bolting to my bedroom door. I cracked it open just enough to listen, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The handle rattled again, harder this time. Then the front door. He was checking all the doors. I felt like I was trapped in some nightmare, my body refusing to function properly. My phone was still in my hand, my fingers fumbling over the screen. 911. I pressed call. The operator picked up almost instantly, but before I could say anything, I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. The sound of a window sliding open. Not mine. Downstairs. He was in the house. I slammed my door shut and locked it, pressing my back against it as if that would do anything. My voice shook as I whispered into the phone. Someone just broke into my house. The operator was calm, asking for my address, telling me to stay on the line. I could barely focus on her words. I was too busy listening to the slow, deliberate creak of footsteps on the stairs. Each one was measured, heavy. He wasn't running. He was taking his time. He was enjoying this. Tears blurred my vision as I scrambled backward, searching for anything to use as a weapon. My hands landed on a heavy glass trophy on my desk, a soccer award from middle school. The steps reached the top of the stairs. I clenched the trophy, my fingers slick with sweat. The air in the room felt suffocating. My body was locked in place, waiting for the moment I'd hear him try my door. But it didn't come. Instead, there was silence. A long, unbearable stretch of silence. Then tap, tap, tap. A soft knocking. Not on my door. On my window. My entire body seized. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. He was there, standing outside on the roof, looking in. My stomach dropped so violently I thought I'd be sick. He had climbed onto the roof. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I could barely make out his face in the darkness, but I saw his teeth grinning, stretched too wide. Then he pressed his palm against the glass. My body moved on instinct. I threw the trophy with everything I had. The window shattered on impact, glass exploding outward. A sharp cry rang out. Then the sound of something heavy slamming against the ground below. I didn't stop to think. I yanked open my door, sprinting down the stairs just as red and blue lights flashed outside. The police. I flew to the front door and ripped it open. 2 officers rushed up the driveway, guns drawn. My words tumbled out in a panicked mess, pointing toward the side of the house. They moved fast, checking the perimeter. A minute later, one of them returned, shaking his head. No one's there. I felt the world tilt beneath me. They checked the backyard, the surrounding streets, but there was nothing. No sign of anyone. The officer suggested maybe the fall had knocked him out and he'd crawled away, but I knew the truth. I knew, because when they asked me what the intruder looked like, I couldn't answer. I never saw his face. I only saw the grin. Story 3. I was 10 years old when it happened. At that age, you think your home is the safest place in the world, a sanctuary where nothing truly bad can ever reach you. That night shattered that illusion forever. It was a Friday. My older brother, Evan, was out with his friends, and my parents were home with my little sister, Lucy, and me. We were in the middle of dinner when the phone rang. I watched my mom's expression shift as she answered, the color draining from her face. It was the hospital. Evan had been in an accident. I only caught bits and pieces, car crash, broken leg, but it was serious enough that my parents immediately jumped into action. They grabbed their coats, bundled Lucy up, and got ready to rush out the door. "Will you be okay here for a bit?" my dad asked, his hand on my shoulder. I nodded. I was 10, not a baby. I could handle being alone for a few hours. Then they were gone. The house felt different the moment the door shut behind them. Emptier, quieter. The silence wasn't comforting. It felt thick, unnatural, pressing against my ears. I tried to shake it off. I went to my room, turned on my PlayStation, and got lost in the flashing lights of my favorite Star Wars game. Time blurred. The clock ticked past midnight, and I was still awake, still distracted. Then, I heard it. The front door opening. I froze, gripping the controller tight enough to make my fingers ache. Had my parents come back already? That didn't make sense. I hadn't heard the car pull up. I turned off the TV and sat there in the dark, listening. Silence. Then footsteps. Slow. Careful. Moving through the house. I crept toward my bedroom door and eased it open just enough to peek through the crack. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it. From the second-floor hallway, I could see straight down to the living room below. The lights were off, but the moonlight spilling through the windows gave just enough illumination for me to see them. 3 figures. Tall. Silent. Standing in my house. They weren't moving. Just standing there, as if they were listening. My stomach twisted violently. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle my breath. They weren't my family. I backed away from the door, heart racing so fast I felt dizzy. I needed to hide. The closet. That was the only place. I slipped inside, pulling the door shut as softly as possible, then crouched behind a stack of old winter coats and cardboard boxes. My fingers dug into my knees as I tried to make myself as small as possible. Then creak. The stairs. They were coming up. I squeezed my eyes shut. My ears strained to pick up every sound. The shuffle of feet on carpet. The sound of a door opening one of the other bedrooms. My door was next. The knob turned. I held my breath as my bedroom door creaked open. The floorboards whispered under their weight. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails bit into my skin. Then another door. The closet door. I felt my stomach lurch into my throat. It opened. I could feel the air shift, hear the rustle of coats as they were pushed aside. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, after what felt like forever, the door clicked shut. I stayed frozen. My legs ached from being crouched so long, but I didn't dare shift. I listened as the footsteps moved away, back into the hall. They weren't leaving. They were still in the house. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe an hour, maybe longer. It wasn't until I heard the distant sound of my parents' car pulling into the driveway that I let out a shaky breath. The front door opened. My mom's voice rang out. I burst from the closet, sprinting down the hall so fast I nearly tripped down the stairs. My parents barely had time to react before I was at the door, gasping out incoherent words. They pushed past me into the house, flipping on lights, searching every room. There was no one there. Nothing was stolen. No signs of forced entry. Just an open door my parents swore they had locked before they left. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know, beyond any doubt, that they were waiting in the dark.